it appears that though at this point that like it might be like a Bottas and Sergio Perez thing. And honestly, in terms of Perez, I think the best thing that could have happened to him is all the malarkey that's gone down this year at Red Bull with the other drivers because suddenly, and you and I, Nate, both said this last week, suddenly Perez ain't looking so bad.
Yeah,
He's not looking like the worst thing in the world because everything that he did last year was almost better than anything that's happened from the second seat this year. I
yeah,
mean, Yuki's been in the points twice, I
yeah.
think. I think he's the best he's done is ninth, and I think he has one other 10th. So he's been in the points twice in that car. So Perez ain't looking so bad. How much do you believe that that is what we're going to see next year from Cadillac, a Bottas Perez lineup?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty strong. First of all, it's a pretty strong lineup for a new team. I'm convinced one of those drivers will be in one of those seats. I think that is the key question: is do we get both of them? We've already alluded to the fact that Bottas might have the option of Alpine,
Mhm.
which arguably from him makes a bit more sense. There's the Mercedes link there, probably likely to be a bit more competitive with Mercedes next year. Gives them a chance. He kind of joined a project when he when he joined Sauber and he was kind of at the back of the field for a bit. And we don't know how good Cadillac are going to be. But yeah, I think Cadillac have made it clear pretty much from the moment they knew Perez was available that he was kind of the number one guy. If you hear, we've got colleagues out in Mexico who say that the deal was pretty much, or the conversation started the moment Perez was basically able to talk to anybody else. Which makes a lot of sense as well. You got a North American car brand interested in a very very popular driver from Mexico. So I would pretty confidently state Perez will be there. And then I think the Bottas thing is just based on does he have a better opportunity elsewhere? Maybe the same is true of Perez, but I think the Alpine Bottas link, and Laurence might be able to correct me, but that seems to be a bit stronger than any suggestion of Alpine and Perez. Um, but then if Bottas doesn't go there, that's when it gets interesting to Cadillac because you look at the likes of Guan Yu Zhou. I saw Mick Schumacher skulking around at the Cadillac launch party that we went to in Miami. He was kind of hiding away, saw me, and I don't know whether it was related, but he kind of ducked behind the person he was with because I don't know if he thought I was with Chris Medland at the time, another journalist. I don't know if he thought we'd take a picture, but I was like, well, I've seen you, Mick, and it's fine. But I know he's been what Cadillac have actually been very clever about doing is they've talked to a lot of drivers. I mean, they've been talking to Formula 2 drivers, they've been talking to Mick Schumacher. So the reason that earlier I mentioned about Yuki leaving, I think his agent had a very brief conversation with Cadillac in Monaco. Again, all kind of standard stuff in the Formula One paddock, but it shows you they have cast their net as wide as they can, and they've said we want to talk to every driver available. And I think that they're actually going to end up with quite an interesting roster if they don't get Bottas next season. There's also Jack Crawford, who's an American who's second in the Formula 2 Championship at the moment. I think he's quite keen to be involved in that project somehow. Maybe a reserve driver role is more likely for him. But yeah, they're kind of in a good position, aren't they, Cadillac? Because they do have a decent selection of drivers, if not the best drivers you're going to get. But they've got a decent selection of drivers, and actually, it might be an easy call for them. But if Bottas isn't there, I think there's still enough interesting picks that they go
Mhm.
for that might excite people.
Yeah, I think the other thing is what Cadillac can offer is a bit of security to any of those drivers. So if Bottas is talking to Alpine, it may only be for a single year, or it might be this year as a trial to see if he can then get an extension on a longer contract. Whereas with Cadillac, you feel like the limiting factor for them is not going to be the drivers, it's going to be the performance of the car, just because of the limited time they've had to prepare for this season. It's just such an uphill struggle. And any driver going there, of course, would want a longer deal because you want to be part of a project and you want to reap the rewards when potentially it moves forward in a few years' time. So that will be interesting. And then from a Cadillac perspective, you want drivers with experience. So, I think that's the best way to push a car forward up the grid to understand its weak points is having two drivers who have seen it all. It's a new regulation set next year, but still there'll be lessons from previous regulation sets that can be applied to that new car. So that'll be a big factor. And then, yeah, the other thing, to go back to what we are talking about earlier, when Red Bull make a decision on what they're doing, assuming Lindblad does move up into Racing Bulls, that's one driver back on the market, as Nate said, could well be Sonoda. And then you've got, potentially a good driver there. So, yeah, I think Cadillac can continue to be a little bit kind of, take their time over it. It's the impression I got from visiting the factory a couple of weeks ago is that drivers, from the outside world is what we all want to know, because those are going to be the two figureheads of this team going into 26. But from internally, that's not at all the biggest concern. Just getting the cars ready, making sure all crash tests are passed. They've actually made some progress with that already with a proof of concept chassis that they have in a hangar or in a warehouse in Silverstone already, and they've been doing crash tests on that. So, but there's just so many things they need to get lined up. And if they wait until the end of this season to see who's left on the drive market, I think that'll be fine, because there's most likely going to be either Bottas or Perez available, probably going to be Perez, and then you can fill in with a second driver. There's enough talent out there that's not a major issue. So yeah, kind of one of those ones to watch the space, but I think perhaps one that will be the last one to fill in, unless they've decided they really want Valtteri and they're worried that he might end up at Alpine.